What do you think? Too much? It's too much. Well, I've seen the Wicked movie. It's happened. I didn't think it was going to happen, but I've watched it now on the big screen. I've seen it. Now, I have spoken a little bit about Wicked. I'm very particular when it comes to musical films, and it takes a lot to win me over. And I can safely say the Wicked film is really good. I would even go as far to say it is one of the strongest stage-to-screen musicals I've seen in a long time. So today, I wanted to present you with my first thoughts. I don't want to review it per se. I want to see it a few more times and be able to break it down like bit by bit before I give you a full review. So instead, I thought I would go back through some of my hopes and fears from my last video and give you a kind of first impressions on Wicked. Why I really enjoyed it. Are there any things I think it missed the ball on? How was the direction, the cast? And address some of my preconceptions on the film before I seen it, now that I have. And mostly, honestly, just rave about it because it's really good. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie. I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do news, versus brackets, tier lists, and if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. But let's dive in to Wicked Part 1. Seeing as the Wizard of Oz themed title card confirmed that this film should have been called Wicked Part 1. I think I'm just going to let myself ramble a bit in this video. It's not going to be like really neatly concise thoughts. It's not going to be like well planned out. I've just kind of written like notes on things I really love. I will say, just because this is going to be an offhanded ramble about everything, I'm not going to do an amazing job avoiding spoilers. I'm going to try my best, but if you want to make sure that you were completely not spoiled, I would watch this video after you've seen the film. First thing I want to bring up is the thing that I felt most confident about going into Wicked, and that is John M. Chu. As I expressed in my hopes and fears video on the Wicked movie, I said that no matter what my fears were, I kind of could negate a lot of them because of John M. Chu being attached to direct. He's already done a music film before in the Heights, and that proved that he understood what it was like to make a musical film, the different challenges of something like adapting a music to the screen rather than just adapting anything to screen. There's so many different challenges that come from making a musical film. And if you can stylize something like In the Heights, something that is set in a very naturalistic location, something that is a lot harder to adapt and get that sense of disbelief and all of that, when you're taking that from stage to screen, if you can do that and do that successfully, you can do Wicked, which is so much more leveled in the fantasy of it all. But John M. Chu is a genius. He is so smart with his direction in this film. There's so much in it that is so cleverly done. He breathes so much life into this material. So much so that a musical that I'm not that massive on. I don't class myself as a massive Wicked fan. I enjoy the musical, but it's never been like in my top favorites. If you watch my versus brackets, you can probably tell that. But this film completely understands Wicked, and it gives it all of the additional time it needs to breathe. Every single song, every single scene feels so much more impactful and meaningful in this new book for the screen. And the way he directs numbers with the choreography and the cinematography and the movement of cameras in certain moments, adding such a unique musicality, not just to the song they're singing, but also the style of the filming, is so impactful. Such a perfect way to breathe musicality, not just through the song just being in the musical, but also through the language of film. I want to walk through each of the songs in this film and just speak a little bit about each of them and the brilliant choices that John M. Chu makes, along with the cinematographers and all of the other people working on this film. The film opens with such a bang with No One Mourns the Wicked. I love this pan through Munchkin Land as we see all of these different villagers kind of giving you opinions on the witch. I love how even behind like Ariana Grande's demeanor and like the cheer, you can see that little bit of sadness in her eyes. There's a massive effigy that they burn. There's all the signs that they're pulling down. So much beautiful detail in these sets and the posters and everything all around Munchkinland. I love the choreography when we're getting into the have another drink of green elixir, keeping the shadowy face very hidden, but still being able to give such a dynamic dance to it is great. The way the camera just really slickly moves around them, and the sudden change in how it all goes from the very like stunted and stillness of when it's the husband and the wife, and suddenly the husband goes, Elphaba's dad goes, and suddenly it becomes a lot more free. There's so many brilliant choices in The Wizard and I adore it so much. As we follow Elphaba just running through this school, I love some of the details of like the background actors noticing Elphaba singing and just kind of giving her dirty looks. Brilliant blocking. Love that. That's so funny. And also adds so much extra life to this school and this location, something that wouldn't really work on stage, but you can add these extra ideas onto screen. Fantastic. And this song features one of the best moments of direction from Jun M. which is when Elphaba's discussing changing her skin color, making it so that her one wish is to become more normal. And we find ourselves in this little balcony bit, this like terrace, where all of these shining lights are like glimmering and keep switching the color of Elphaba's skin, changing that reflection. And when she goes for that big note, if I degreenify you, for a split second, as a red shine goes across her face, you see Cynthia Erivo's natural skin color. And then it fades back to green as the lights flicker and move across when she kind of drops it and goes, oh, that's not important to me. Oh my God, so clever. Such a brilliant way to embed that into the location that they're in, and also add all of this extra meaning onto the cinematography. Oh, it looks gorgeous. It's so smart, so strong. It's such a dynamic scene. It's such a dynamically directed song. Oh, it's gorgeous. Now, I said it on Instagram like yesterday. I don't know when this video is coming out. Hopefully tonight. But I love What Is This Feeling? I will straight up say I think it is my favorite song in Wicked. I know that's controversial. I know that something like Defying Gravity, you know, it's more impactful, but I love What Is This Feeling because of the harmonies, because of the way it builds. The ensemble bit as well, so fun. And I love a clashy harmony, and I love people singing different verses over each other. It scratches my brain. And it's so well staged in this film. There's so many great moments in there. I love the letter writing and them actually being able to hear each other in the film, as we really get a glimpse of this like smaller space and them just being at each other's throats. It's so funny. I love the split screen that they use as well. It's actually really, really clever. Bringing them closer together into this moment, this kind of rivalry bubbling up. I love the light that Glinda has that reflects onto Elphaba as well, showing in a visual way how much Glinda is kind of encroaching onto her space. I love these little bits of rivalry that you see between them, the fighting that they do, the rushing to the one seat left in the lecture hall, the little things that happens in the rooms as well. So clever, so fun. There's a crowd choreography as well that's so silly, so wonderful, as you kind of feel like the rest of the school kind of crowding around Glinda. There's a brilliant moment, a fantastic moment of cinematography where it's the line, these things are meant to try us. And Glinda stands by this door and the window kind of shapes around Ariana Grande's head. So it forms this halo behind her. Genius bit of staging. I'm gonna say it. It's one of the strongest sequences in the film. I love it, especially for a song that a lot of other people see as inconsequential, but it's one of my favorites. I love that the film manages to give it so much style and so much grace. It's so good. I love it. I adore it. Now, something bad. This song is constantly clowned on. This song is one of the weaker songs from Wicked, in my personal opinion. You can disagree with that. Theatre is what's subjective. But in my personal opinion, it's one of those kind of songs that if you're doing a traditional stage-to-screen musical, is one of the things you cut. It can be done better through dialogue, it can be done better through this, that, or the other. You know, I think there's better ways to do that moment. However, this film proved me wrong. I will say it. This film proved me wrong. They switch location of something bad. They give it extra meaning. I think they give it extra punch with the different audience that Dr. Midland is giving it to. With all of these beautiful silhouettes and like the danger increasing, the orchestrations of this song, giving it an extra kind of impact. It's a small moment in the film, but still, they've taken a song I don't really like that much and feel like through the staging of it on screen, through the blocking, through the cinematography, through the ideas, have given it a stronger reason. So much so that I was expecting to watch this number and go, yeah, that one could be cut. But no, I feel like what they do is so clever, the bit they use is so smart that it feels paramount to this film and to that very important plot line. Dancing Through Life is such an explosive sequence. It's one of the few things I actually have a criticism about because I don't like how a lot of the sequence is backlit. There's a lot of lens flares in this moment, and it's a little bit jarring in places. While I do love the location in this library, while I do love the chaos that Jonathan Bailey's character, Jonathan Bailey as Fiyero, causes in this location, I love like the spinning library section. That feels very much like straight out of Oz. Like a nice way to take the idea of a library, but make it in a fantasy world. But I'll speak more about location later. It's just that a lot of these scenes, a lot of these really important moments are staged like right in front of windows, or like there's a big bright white light that shines through the turntable spinny circly library bit, and it doesn't feel as purposeful or as striking as some of the other visual elements of this film. But that is tiny nitpick, because eventually when we move out of the library, when we have them sneaking away to the Ozdas Ballroom, it's glorious. The spectacle of that set piece is unbelievable. I love the additional dance sequence they give to it. Jonathan Bailey kind of leading and riling up this crowd. And John M. Chu's direction of Elphaba's entrance into this hall, really stretching this moment, making sure you feel every single ounce of pain that Elphaba is feeling in this moment as she's placed front and center into that crowd. It's awful to watch, but that's the point. It's so uncomfortable, and you can feel the regret and the anguish that Glinda feels. They stretch that moment. It's a moment because of the extra runtime that they can really play with. And pacing-wise, it's perfect. I love Popular. Popular is so good. Popular is one of those songs that I was like, you can play with this so much, and I really think they do. I love how it's this moment where you really get to build that dynamic between Elphaba and Glinda, and I think they really sell that change. A song like Popular is so important, and these moments for Elphaba and Glinda are so important because of what happens later, because of Defying Gravity, and I feel like a lot of this direction gives it so much extra weight. I love how they play with this room, constantly going from case to case as Glinda opens up more things to try on Elphaba. It blends the musical with that kind of like makeover sequence so well. It's glorious. But one of my favorite shots is like it's almost like a blinking or miss it moment, is a bit where they both run in front of a mirror and kind of do like a shoulder bit. It was in one of the trailers, but it's so beautiful and is such a charming moment for the pair that really aligns you to them. And they extend the ending of Popular. If you've listened to it, you know what I mean, which makes it even more grandiose and makes it even more of a showcase of Ariana Grande's energy and vocals in this moment. Another thought I'd bring on to a bit later is discussing Elphaba and Fiyero's relationship. But I'm Not That Girl is a really sweet moment. It does slow down the pace of the film quite a bit. And I think when we're speaking about these bigger, flashier songs, I do think it's one that is less stylized in a way. I do think it has some really nice touches as Elphaba kind of wanders through this space and like the glitter sparkles, that's the best I can describe it, kind of coming up. It does have a nice bit of stylization, but I actually think it's more so in kind of Elphaba stepping away, and that's kind of proxemics. That's more of a stagey term instead of a theatrical term, but proxemics, how distant people are from each other, That's what I mean. I don't know if there's an equivalent screen term. I'm a theatre person. Of like all of Elphaba's friends, the people that she's starting to build up with, but her still kind of keeping herself away from it. That distance, and Fiyero kind of looking back, feeling a lot more open to her and this friendship group, even though she's trying to keep her distance. There's a really fun dynamic in that staging of it all. I don't know what this movement is, but I'm going with it. One Short Day, I was not expecting. I was not expecting that whole additional section. It is probably the biggest change when it comes to the music in this film. Everything else only has like a little additional reprise, only has like a slight change in orchestrations. There's not many lyric changes, there's not many additional materials except for One Short Day. I love all the cameos in this number. I'm trying not to spoil it. If you've listened to the soundtrack, you know the ones I'm talking about, but this does include some very heavy hitter cameos, both in the middle and right at the end. But again, I love the way that the Emerald City just comes to life. The first panning shot that we get through the Emerald City, as we can get a little glimpse of all of these different locations, almost like we are Elphaba and Glinda experiencing this for the first time. Running around to see everything, to take it all in. And I love how John M. Chu directs the contrast of that joy, of that life, and the juxtaposition of that to the moment where they enter the wizard's castle. As we go from this absolutely bustling location full of joy and laughter and cheer to just silence, darkness. Really clever and really immediately off-putting. Immediately sowing those seeds of doubt in your mind about the wizard. Now, the other song in Wicked that I don't think a lot of people love, and it's never really been my favourite, is A Sentimental Man. It's a small moment, which is very much why I feel like it gets the reputation it has, but I wish that I could say my feelings on something bad in this film were the same about A Sentimental Man. I honestly feel like this is the song they could have cut. Obviously, they've got all this additional time. They don't really have to cut it, but if there was something that I went, this could be dialogue, it's that song. It's nice visually as they find themselves in the Oz model, but I feel like a lot of the spectacle of it comes after the song. A lot of the really cool visuals come afterwards, instead of being really baked well in like a lot of the other songs in this film. This is very, very nitpicky because, you know, that's what I do. That's who I am as a person. I'm so hypercritical now, it's unreal. And I mean, a 1 minute song is nothing. So even if this wasn't as strong or hard-hitting as some of the others, I don't really mind. What is strong and hard-hitting? Defying Gravity. They seize the opportunity to make this the finale that it deserves to be. Because obviously, if this had been one film, this is a number that they would have had to strip back a little bit to make sure that whatever comes afterwards doesn't really feel like it's less impactful, especially knowing that they go from that to Thank Goodness, which is not a song that I love. Like, when you compare the scale and the spectacle of that versus Thank Goodness, you can like both, but I feel like there's obviously one that's meant to be a heavy hitter finale. And the scale they give it is fantastic. We get this sequence so beautifully directed as they're making their way up the tower trying to escape. The visuals of like the balloon and the flames and everything, gorgeous. And they really allow it to build. John M. Chu's direction just absolutely shines here. The tension that builds as the officers are trying to get in to capture her. And then the freedom she finds. I love how it deals with this very intimate moment, this 360 pan around Glinda and Elphaba as this choice they both face is bubbling up. It builds this tension, it builds this friendship. The additional time in this film really allowing you to properly connect to these two as a pair, as a friendship, making it feel so true and raw and giving it such an emotional impact when Glinda eventually does say no. And then the flying sequence, the jumping out the window, the rising back up, the final verse. I really love the change that they make in this to ground it as a finale as well. There's moments that the stage show can't show you and can only tell you through dialogue that the film manages to portray. As we go between these different characters from the subplots and start to set up the impact of Elphaba's choice here, the fear and the shock, and does a great job at setting these seeds for part 2. It's fantastic. It's so good. Even like the one musical number that I don't really love in this film is still quite dynamic, still well directed at least. And you can tell I'm pretty positive on the songs, which definitely negates one of my biggest fears, that was the songs in the film and not cutting anything. It feels like they gave a lot of reasons to the obvious numbers to cut of why they're still in there. And obviously the expansion of the runtime, just focusing on Act 1, allows them to have the time to be able to justify them too. Let's speak a little bit about adaptation, because surprisingly, despite this being like an hour and a half longer than Act 1 normally is, it's a very faithful adaptation. I'm really glad for this, because I think one of my biggest fears was them going back to the book and just pulling loads of new subplots from the book that aren't in the musical, and these feeling in contrast or in conflict with what the musical of Wicked is, because the book and the musical are two very different things. Even despite the fact that the musical is based on the book, they have very different tones, they have very different styles. The additional runtime is, for the most part, used to just expand scenes, just to give it a little bit more time to breathe, to focus a little bit more on the friendship building, a little bit more on subplots, and of course, to expand certain songs and moments. Put in your big flashy dance sequences, and all of these feel very purposeful. And I think it makes this story feel ever more stronger. I definitely watched this, especially watching this now, because I last saw the stage show of Wicked a very long time ago. I think it's been about a decade since I saw Wicked, and obviously a lot has changed for me. And I think watching this musical now, watching it on screen, and the extra time that they can dedicate to discrimination plotline is really impactful. As someone who is from a minority group, I really align myself with a lot of the allegory that this musical speaks about. That encroaching danger, that encroaching hatred. Obviously, this musical tackles it from the perspective of animals. These animals that are able to talk, are teaching in these universities, and slowly having those rights taken away. Obviously, I can sit here and relate to that from a trans perspective, but there's so many different groups who could also relate to that. It speaks to a lot of different minority groups and the othering of people. And of course, that's not even talking about the baked-in colorism, that side of the plot line. That can be very easily related to from people of color. And having a black woman, a black performer playing Elphaba makes that story and highlights that theme tenfold. I'm really grateful for this time that they can spend on that, for the additional time that they can spend on Glinda and Elphaba's relationship, the additional time that they can spend on all of these little subplots, defining a lot more of Elphaba and Nessa Rose's relationship, giving us time to see how much she cares for her and how much the attention that's put on her affects her sister as well. The only storyline I wish they had spent a little bit more time on is Elphaba and Fiera, especially knowing how important that's going to be in part 2. I don't think the film justifies a lot of the relationship that's built between them. It feels like there's not enough time that they spend together to really make that feel justified. Even within the stuff that is in part 1, it feels a little bit forced in. I would have liked to see them spend a little bit more time together, become a little bit closer, for that really to feel a bit more justified. There's only really one scene, and it doesn't really feel like they have enough chemistry within that one scene to justify what happens. And especially when you've got all of this additional time, when you've got the full length of the musical just for Act 1, it feels weird that this is the one thing for me that felt like it was a bit lacking. But overall, the changes, great. The additional dialogue, fantastic. Really highlighting the themes, setting up stuff for Act 2, giving us more time to breathe with these characters and really root for them and feel for their plights and relationships. And let's talk about this cast. This was another thing that I was like, this is gonna be fantastic. I'm not worried about the cast. And I'm very glad I wasn't, because oh my god. Symphony Revo, fantastic. Phenomenal performance. So so beautiful. I love the little moments of rivalry that she gives between her and Glinda. I love the contrast in her from the start when, you know, she's so used to being beaten down and told to stay quiet. And suddenly, with something like Wizard of Oz being able to open herself up, she portrays that with so much real heart and emotion. It's so completely believable. Do we even need to speak about her vocals? Because her vocals are off the chart. Defying Gravity, Wizard and I. Her choices in riffs are so unique and clear and strong and gorgeous. And she is paired wonderfully with Ariana Grande. This pair work perfectly together. A lot of casting is making sure whoever you cast match. And Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo match. Ariana manages to sell the Broadway sound, the operatic sound. She's so funny. She manages to sell so much of the emotional moments in this film. She is a real highlight. I love her version of Popular. I love her moments in Defying Gravity, as you can tell, even without her saying it, the decision that she's making, she knows, and she is portraying it so perfectly that she knows she can't go with her friend. Jonathan Bailey's Fiyero, the moments that we get with him are fantastic. I love his energy from the start, from the second we meet him. The way he bounces off Ariana Grande's Glinda is fantastic to watch. He commands the screen in things like Dancing with Life, completely taking over the film. Michelle Yeoh as Morrible, fantastic. Vocally, she is less strong than some of the other performers in this film who are more used to a singing background. Obviously, Cynthia Erivo, Jonathan Bailey, both coming from musical theatre. Ariana Grande originally coming from musical theatre, going into more of a pop sound. Michelle Yeoh, comparatively, isn't the strongest singer, but for a character like Morrible, who only has like one little bit of singing, it's fine. Because it's the acting, it's the performance that really carries her through. Obviously, if you haven't seen Wicked, slight spoilers, but because of the way that Michelle Yeoh performs the maternal side of Morrible, the caretaker, the mentor, the tutor, being the one person that Elphaba can turn to, it makes the betrayal feel even harsher, even worse, and even more hard-hitting. Jeff Goldblum makes such strong impression in such a short amount of time as the Wizard. I can't wait to see more of him in part 2. I love the way that Jeff Goldblum actually finally gets to do some magic in a film. I bet you love that. He's got such a perfect energy for that role because Jeff Goldblum naturally is like a really whimsical kind of person. He suits that role so perfectly. Even Slater as Bok and Melissa Bode as Nessa Rose, two fantastic performances. I love even towards the very end, even when these two have kind of formed together, you can tell a certain rift is building between them as Nessa starts to notice more and more of Bok's behavior. There's not much additional time that's given to this pairing, and yet they still use the time to perfectly set this pair up. We have the vocal performance of Dr. Dillerman from Peter Dinklage. I would like to also just say, making the animals actual animals in this film was a good decision. I take back my I wish he was a goat man. I take it back. I can admit when I was wrong. I was wrong. Having a CGI goat man to make it an actual goat, I feel like underlines these themes a lot more. And I love the creativity that he uses showing how his classroom works, showing how he's adapted it to how he works as well. Dinklage's vocal performance is wonderful. We only get a couple of moments, but you really get a sense of who he is. His friendship to Elphaba and how much he actually does really care about her. The fears that he's feeling as this encroaching danger is coming in, making it ever the more impactful what happens to him later. And we get brilliant supporting performances from Bronlyn James and Boeing Yang. Elphaba's cliquey friends who are always there being a little bit judgy, a really brilliant presence in this film. The two of them chewing the scenery, I love it. Giving a real, like, Mean Girls, Heathers energy of the three of them. Love it so much. Something I also really love, cinematography. I've mentioned a lot of the cinematography that I really love, but even, like, the scale, the spectacle, the effects blended with the physical is so well done. There's such a perfect balance that has been struck between the two. A location like Shears is so expansive and gorgeous. The Emerald City being a beautiful contrast to that. The Wizard Castle. Even the different places in Oz, like the fields and everything and the brick road. Oh, it is beautiful. It looks fantastic. There's so much life in the spectacle of this. I love how, even though it's obviously taking a lot of homage from Wizard of Oz, which was another one of my fears that it would be too much in Wizard of Oz, it still feels very uniquely Wicked in many ways. A nice blending of the two, which is something that is quite hard to do, and I'm glad that they went in the direction they went with a lot of it. It's a visual treat. And of course, we can talk about some cameos. This film was mostly filmed in London, if I'm correct. And because of that, a lot of these background extras, a lot of the students at Shiz, a lot of the people in the Emerald City are musical theatre performers from London. So this was a really fun game of kind of going, oh, that's Alice Byrne. Oh, there's Cleve September. Oh, I saw them in Hamilton. Oh, I've seen them in Wicked. You can even listen out and vocally you'll recognize some people like Sharon D. Clarke and Jenna Boyd, these two playing the doctors and the midwives in the opening song. Actually, something I really, really like is the fact that the person who basically raises Elphaba is an animal. This immediately shows you a clear reason of why Elphaba aligns herself with characters like Dr. Dillamond, why a lot of her wants and needs are trying to help the animals of Oz, because they've been her biggest supporters all through her life. They've been the people who've actually cared for her, and therefore giving so much extra reason of why she is so hurt and so disgusted by the scapegoating of them later in the film. Really, really smart. The only thing I will say about cameos is that how many are left for part 2? I don't know how many are left for part 2. A lot of them have already been. We've seen quite a few of them already. I mean, a lot of the heavy hitters are done in a song like One Short Day, in Dear Old Cheers, in No One Wants the Wicked. There's a couple more that we can get, but a lot of the big ones have been done in this first film. So I do wonder who we're getting in part 2. I don't know, we're just gonna have to wait and see. But finally, in this video, I just want to address my criteria. When I am watching a musical film, I have 2 criteria. 1, you have to stylize. Stylization is what makes musical theatre work on screen. Because there is a natural suspense of disbelief on stage, you don't need to stylize that much. You can have really natural things like Les Mis or In the Heights still breaking into song because you know that you're watching a musical, you know you're watching a play. But on screen, that's a lot harder to get naturally. Wicked is so easily stylized that it hits this one on the head completely. It gets it 100%. And even within that, it still manages to take it the extra mile through the cinematography of all of these numbers. Even the normal scenes in the musical feel so different to every single number. And that is well appreciated. And criteria 2, you have to adapt. Not everything that works on stage will work on screen. And while my fear was that them not cutting anything would be the thing that would make them not reach that criteria, it's the opposite. Because of the way that they've taken it, split it into 2, they've managed to have their cake and eat it too. Expanding it, keeping everything in, but still adapting. Adding things in is as much adapting as taking things out. This may be a very faithful adaptation, but because of the fact that it's only telling half of the story, it allows them to do that and manages to reach that second criteria for me. It saw the challenges of Wicked, it saw the challenges of the plot, of the contrast between the 2 acts, of the way that Act 1 ends, and very cleverly took a risk with splitting into 2, and I feel for this part, that has paid off. Obviously, Act 2 of Wicked goes in a very different direction. We don't know if it's going to be as justified in that part as it was in this, but we can only judge it on what we've seen so far, and so far, Wicked is very, very strong. I would say it is definitely within my top 10 best musical films of all time. I'd have to rewatch it and rewatch a couple of others to give you a definite positioning on where it lands, but I would say it lands very, very high for me. It's a very smart adaptation with fantastic direction, brilliant performances, wonderful adaptation that really highlights all of these themes in Wicked. It is the film we have been waiting for. If we were waiting this long for a Wicked film and this is what we get, that wait was worth it. But what do you think? Theatre is obviously what? Subjective. So What are your thoughts? Did you like the Wicked film? Did you have any little nitpicks like I have? My tiny little nitpicks completely negated by all of the positive praise I've just said completely. I really did like this film. Let me know all your thoughts on Wicked in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. Here's some links to some other videos on screen right now and a link to my Instagram if you'd like to drop me a follow over there. I also have other social links and a merch store in the description down below. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!